amazing event. If you are a member of the Box Elder County Republican Women, please wave your hand. I would also like to acknowledge my dear friend and the president of the Utah Federation of Republican Women, Carrie Melkovich. Leading us in prayer is Lyle Holmgren. Lyle is the mayor of Tremonton.
Our Father in heaven, as we come before Thee at this time, we are indeed thankful for the opportunity of being able to gather here this evening for this. We're grateful for the Box Elder County Republican Women's Group for putting this meeting together and for us to have an opportunity to participating in the democratic process. We're grateful for those who are willing to serve, for their courage and for their tenacity and for their desire to do what is right for us as citizens of this great country. We ask for Thy Spirit and blessing to be with us this evening, that we might be able to learn, that we might be able to gain from the information that is going to be shared with us here this evening, that we might be able to come away better resolved to ensure the democratic process continues in our great country. This we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Lyle. We have a special treat tonight, singing the national anthem a cappella. Our 4 Box Elder County High School students, Abby Finley, Clara Nelson, Lauren Brockbank, and Andrea Rogers. They're accompanied by their high school choir accompanist, Lisa Finley.
Will the audience please rise?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly reveals at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets and blood of bursting in air came through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
That was amazing. Tom Peterson, the representative for House District 1, will lead us with the pledge.
If you all stand back up and give your proper hands salute and follow the pledge of allegiance.
them and fully support and endorse Mount Peterson for House District 1. I am honored to announce that the Box Elder County Republican women also fully support and endorse Representative Matt Gwen for House District 6. So Matt and Tom, if you guys want to come up here, I know they've been great advocates for their districts. We are pleased to have them both here with us tonight.
Thank you again. My name is Thomas Peterson. I represent House District 1, which is most of the Box Elder County from Main Street, Raven City West, North, Manaway, and small portion of Cache County. So I appreciate y'all being here. We don't want to take time tonight. We know what is really important and why everyone's here, but we want to thank you for being involved, being willing to come and support this and to get educated and to learn about these wonderful candidates. So thank you for being here. I am running, and so appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again for being here. My name is Matthew Gwynn. I represent District 6. It's a multi-county district. We actually go into Weaver County. Hopefully, you've been satisfied with the service and representation provided to you for those that are in District 1. I want to mention, I sit next to Tom on the House floor, and I think we do a pretty good job working together and supporting and killing policy that may be good or bad for you. I don't know if he feels the same way. But I want to take just a second to thank these wonderful men and women to my right who are fighting so hard to spend even more time away from friends and family, defending what it is that we love here in the state of Utah. If we can give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Matt and Tom. I'd also like to give a shout out to Lisa Marble. Lisa, where are you? Oh, there you are. Lisa is the Box Elder County GOP chair. She is a great friend and has helped me immensely. Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate your support. All of us share a common bond, or you wouldn't be here tonight. We are all committed to family, faith, and freedom. Freedom. With that declaration, a new nation was born. Our founding fathers brought forth this new nation, inspired by the belief in the self-evident truths that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was with a firm reliance on the protection of our divine God that our founding fathers, men of courage, strength, and conviction, pledged each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. Today, we find these rights under constant attack. We all know that 4 more years of a Biden presidency will completely destroy our republic as we once knew it. What are you going to do about it? Your vote matters. What does 4 more years of an open border look like? What does 4 more years of oppressive government regulations, higher food and gas prices look like? What about a failing economy, rampant crime and drugs, attacks on our civil, religious, and individual liberties, and our First and Second Amendment rights? Will our Constitution continue to exist as the law of the land? Love President Trump, hate President Trump. He is our presumptive nominee. We must stand together, united, to protect our country from those that seek to destroy the very foundation that our founding fathers built America. John Adams once wrote, "Liberty lost is lost forever." President Ronald Reagan coined the term the 11th Commandment, which reads, "Thou shalt not speak ill of any fellow Republican." We need to follow this commandment now more than ever. Maybe we can't all agree on the issues, but what we can do is join together to protect our conservative values and our freedoms. The Republican Party is sharply divided. Now is not the time to be divided. Now is the time for us to stand united to protect our country. In one of George Washington's prayers, he prayed to Almighty God to incline the hearts of the citizens to entertain a brotherly love and affection for one another. We need to pray this same prayer. If we are not united, we will surely fall. Join me in uniting together to elect leaders that will listen, advocate, and champion our principles. Leaders that will stand for Utah and our conservative values and are committed to protecting them. United together as one voice, we will make a difference. We are honored to have an amazing mayor with us tonight, Brigham City Mayor DJ Bond. DJ has had such a big heart and love for our community. It is a privilege to have him here with us tonight. Join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator DJ Bond.
Thanks, Karina. I appreciate that. I've got the rules for tonight and then the questions. Before I get started, if you squint real hard, you can kind of see gray hues in my face. If I step out behind the pulpit, you'll see Mike Schultz in my dress. I've got the cowboy boots and the white red jeans, or big red jeans, so hopefully I fit in here up on stage with a few of these folks. The rules for our question and answer time, which, can I just go off script for a second? I hate these things. They do not give these guys enough time, and it's not, to answer these questions really. So I encourage you to get them in the hallway once they're out there to follow up on these things. So, and I'm not condemning anything, that's the time we got, but I just hate these things because there's a lot of context and other things to back up why they feel the way they do. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to talk about themselves and why they are running for the county, for the Senate seat. This is county commission. That's okay. Does anybody want that job? For the Senate seat, there are 3x5 note cards on each of your chairs. If you've already filled out the questions, I have them. If you have a question, please write it out and raise your hand for it to be collected. If you have more than one question, please raise your hand and you will be given more note cards. Can I just add a note there? Please if at all possible, make sure your questions are something that can be answered by all of the candidates, not just specific to one candidate. That will help tonight's event. Please be respectful. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give their closing argument. We have a timekeeper right down here that will make sure the candidates stay to their allotted times. So we'll start with our introductions. We'll start from closest to me, Brad Wilson, and move to his right. And we'll give you, according to this, 3 minutes. Oh, you got one? Okay.
Whatever.
There's another one there too. Okay. You got it. There you go.
Well, it is great to be in Brigham City tonight. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Karina, for putting together an amazing event. I think this is probably one of the bigger delegate events that I have been to so far. And I am really honored to be a candidate for the U.S. Senate today. And let me just tell you, I never imagined that I would be in political service. And I never imagined that I would be a candidate for the United States Senate. But I loved my experience as Speaker of the House for a number of years. But in my heart of hearts, I've always been a business person. My wife Jenny and I have owned a number of small businesses over the years. And it was actually Jenny about a year ago who said to me, Brad, you actually need to really think about doing this, because this work and this role, who's going to represent Utah in the U.S. Senate, really, really matters. And she is right. As I have traveled all across this state, I've heard people very concerned about the trajectory of this country. They're angry, they're frustrated, they don't understand how our leaders in Washington, D.C. have been able to get us to this point, where the interest on the national debt is the second biggest line item in the federal government budget, where we have an open border, and the problems across this country go on and on. But more than anything, people in this state are angry and frustrated, and so am I, about the legacy and the gift, or the terrible gift, that we are giving to the next generation. And what we all know is we need to elect a conservative from this state that reflects Utah's values, someone that's going to go back to Washington, D.C. and help get this country back on track. What we also know we need is you're going to hear from candidates up here, we're not going to have a lot of difference between each other on the issues. There's not a lot of daylight. But what there is differences on is what are people's experience, what are people's qualifications to do this work. And I am the only candidate that's running for this office that has been through the fire and is tested and trusted to do this work. And let me give you some examples. While I was Speaker of the House, we didn't give you one income tax cut or two, we gave you three for the biggest income tax cuts in the history of the state of Utah. We just, yeah, that's right, that's a good thing, right? We, in this state, after I became Speaker of the House, enforced or created a situation where you no longer in this state have to have a permit in your wallet to exercise your Second Amendment rights, and you now have constitutional carry in the state of Utah. That's right. We in this state made the decision to keep men out of women's sports, which we thought was the right thing to do. And I took the fight to the EPA by suing the EPA and Biden's federal government multiple times. Anyway, thank you, and we'll talk more about these things later.
Hey, Speaker Wilson. Carol.
Hey, I would say, I can almost say this about Brent, but I am the only non-politician. I'm going to give you that through your dad, sorry, Brent, who was on this stage. On the other hand, Carolyn Phippen. I am also the one who has the broadest and deepest policy perspective on federal policy through a constitutional lens of anybody up on this stage or in this race. I have worked on a broad range of policy issues. I have written on policy for over 15 years, and I have been involved in this process for a long time doing the real work. I'll say before that, I spent 20 years at home raising my 5 boys. Because ultimately, no matter what our politicians do, they cannot save a nation that is failing from families that are failing. And this state is what it is because we are built on strong families and homes that have an underpinning of a faith and belief in God. And until we are willing to say that, and until we are willing to govern as though we actually respect the individual, every individual, we will not get back to what this country was meant to be and what it once was, by the way. I think we are completely outside, especially at the federal level, of the bounds of the Constitution that our founders put in place. The Constitution is that document that simply protects us from the power of a strong and forceful government. That's all it is. And we are not respecting those limitations. And those who have been involved in government for years and decades are the very people who have put us in this position where the only thing, thank you, where the only way back is a complete restoration of those constitutional principles. So it is incumbent on every single one of us in this room and every single individual throughout this state and this country who loves America to start to do the hard work of restoring the United States of America to what God meant it to be.
Hello everyone, Trent Staggs. How many here are delegates, state delegates? Wow, okay. That's very important to me as a convention-only candidate. I grew up in Orem, moved to South Jordan high school years, being a high school graduate, went to the University of Utah, got an undergraduate degree, got my MBA from BYU, operated several companies, in fact, helped take an energy company public. So energy dominance is incredibly important to me. And for the last 10 years, now going on 11, I've been honored to serve the residents of Brewerton City, and the last 7 of which I've been mayor. About a year ago, a little over, my wife and I decided that we would run in this race. And it really is a team effort, I gotta tell you. This is something that we didn't come to lightly, but at the end of the day, I just couldn't accept the fact that Massachusetts had a 3rd senator and had it in our state. And I said, you know what, enough is enough. We're gonna go ahead and replace Mitt Romney. That's what we did. We decided to run and we challenged him. We were able to challenge Mitt Romney. And not just by announcing my candidacy, no exploratory committee, no waiting until after he decided he wasn't seeking re-election. We were in it, And we called him out time and time again, even in national media. From Mark Levin's show to Charlie Kirk to my speech recently in CPAC, we've been calling out that issue. Because folks, that's really what it comes down to. The problems we face in this country is not just Democrat, it's also the establishment, entrenchment in our own party. And we have to have people that have demonstrated the backbone to stand up and say, no, enough is enough. We're not going to do this anymore. And that's what's typified my career in 10, 11 years now, whether it be the way in which I've challenged Mitt Romney, whether it be the way in which as a mayor, I rejected lockdowns and mandates of any kind. We kept Riverton City open, said no to ESG, fought inappropriate materials in school, fought high-density housing in our community. Thank you. And it goes on and on. You can go to TrentStags.com, take a look at the page Proven Fighter, and see these examples for yourselves. So as delegates, you can come to that determination. Who has that ability to stand up? And I'm building a coalition. That's why we received these endorsements. That's why I brought Senator Tommy Tuberville out here just the other week. Congressman Matt Gaetz was here just last night in my hometown of Riverton. Kerry Layton's endorsed me. I have a coalition of folks. We're going to go back to D.C. with President Trump back in office, day 1 of January 2025, and get this country back on track.
Brent.
Thank you. My name is Brent Orrin Hatch, and most of you don't know me, but I want to let you know who I am and what type of experience I have. Because in deference to Brad and Carolyn, I think I have the most experience that's relevant in this race. When I finished law school, I was blessed to do well enough that I was asked by Robert Bork, who was then the top constitutional scholar and judge and conservative in the United States. He taught me, and he wrote 2 great books, Attempting America and Slouching for More. Maybe some of you have read those. But he taught me that the power of the Constitution is to limit government, not to expand it. We've really fallen short of that. It was a great opportunity for me to work with that man, and it also taught me how blood sport being in D.C. is. Because those of you who know that experience, the Democrats went after him personally, but they could not compete with him in an election and tried to destroy him. My work for Judge Bork allowed me to get an offer from President Reagan. President Reagan was one of the greatest presidents we've ever had. He was conservative and he served with dignity. And it was an honor for me to be able to serve with him. Do you remember in his first election, they said he was going to create a World War III. He was probably going to drop a nuclear bomb. We were going to lose our individual rights. And the economy was going to be shit. Ruined, right? What happened? The exact opposite. The Soviet Union came down. He told Gorbachev to take down this wall. The economy was great. He put Anton and Scalia on the Supreme Court. Conservative things happened, but they happened with dignity. And I was glad to serve with President Reagan. I then served in the White House, the first Utahn to ever do that. And I was the bulldog that the president would send up to the Hill when it was time to fight with the Congress and protect the president and protect the White House. I've been a conservative in fighting in the federal government. Nobody else has served in all 3 branches of government in the federal government like I have. And to tell you what kind of conservative I am, my life's work as a lawyer has also been punctuated with the fact that I've been a director of the Federalist Society. Now, some of you may know what that is. It started as a small handful of attorneys, and we grew it into the largest conservative organization, legal organization in the United States. And we helped President Reagan, the first President Bush, the second President Bush, and Donald Trump pick conservative Supreme Court justices, and I personally worked on every one of those. No one on this panel has done anything remotely like that. 3 justices by President Trump to turn our Supreme Court to where it now follows constitutional principles. I believe that no one has the type of experience I have. No one has fought harder through their whole life for conservative principles, but like President Reagan, with dignity. Brent Hatch, present. Thank you.
Well, good evening. My name is John Curtis, and I'm delighted to be here with you. I know some of you know me, but many of you are getting to know me, so I'd love to just share a few thoughts with me about who John Curtis is and what you can expect from me if I'm elected to the Senate. Let me go back to when I was in Provo. I had a small business, and some of you will get a kick out of this. We manufactured shooting ranges, designed, built, and installed shooting ranges all over the world. And as part of that, I learned firsthand what it's like to have the government's overreach of taxation and regulations. I remember my partners asking me to hop on an airplane, fly back to the East Coast, beg a customer to pay his bill so that I could get back on the plane and make payroll. And many of you small business owners know what that's like. We sold our business, and I had the opportunity to run and be the mayor of Provo City. And I'm standing here before you as one of the only elected officials, perhaps on the planet, at least one that I know, that actually reduced a government budget. When I left office, property taxes were lower 8 years after I took office than they were 8 years before. Well, I served 8 years and enjoyed every minute of it, and many of you know that I ran in the special elections to replace Jason Chaffetz, and for the last 7 years, I've represented Utah's 3rd congressional district on the eastern part of the state. Now, the good thing about me is you don't have to guess what I would do if I'm elected. You don't have to listen to a speech where I can tell you what I might do. You can actually look at my record and see what I've done. So I want to touch just quickly on a couple of areas, and hopefully the questions today will dive down deeper into each one of these areas. The first is public lands, and I see you brought Bishop here, the Master of Public Lands, and under his tutelage, I actually transferred more federal land to state ownership than anybody in the state's history, passed one of the largest public lands bills. My district, over there on the east part, is over 90% federally owned. I've been to the border not once, not twice, but 3 times, and today I am sure we'll have questions so that I can dig in and give you more information. I serve as the vice chair of the Energy and Grid Security Subcommittee. And my colleagues back in Washington, D.C. will tell you I've done more than anybody in Washington to push back on this narrative that somehow our fossil fuels are bad. And I've documented it in the United States and around the world that they're actually part of the solution and not the problem. I work hard on China issues. I've been so successful pushing back on China, there's actually a warrant for my arrest in China. And finally, I would say that I have voted time and time again against Joe Biden's reckless spending. Not only that, I'm sure this will be a question too, and I look forward to sharing with you, beyond just voting against it, what we can actually do to spend our to curb our spending. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. All right, candidates, let's toss you a softball. How about that? To get us
Sounds
started. We'll start with Carolyn, move to her right, circle back, and then to Brad, and we'll just work our way around as the first respondent to these questions. First question, and again, this can be hard in a minute. If you could permanently change one thing about America today, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, really? Okay, what would it be? It would be the strength of our families, because ultimately, like I said, if we do not have strong families, we have nothing, and government can never make up for what our families don't provide. I'm going to say, and cut me off when I hit my minute, but I served a mission for my church in Czechoslovakia right after the wall came down. My companion and I were the first sisters to go into that country. And I expected to see an economy that was decimated, but I'll tell you the piece that really surprised me. We saw a culture and family life that was completely in shatters because of the impact that the government had on tearing up relationships and creating dependency on government over neighbors and family and turning them against each other. It will destroy everything that is good about this country and everything that is good about humanity. So it would be restoration of family.
Well, I've been saying for the last 10, 11 months I've been campaigning, I championed 3 things: smaller limited government, safer families, and a stronger economy. If I could just change one thing, though, however, to the question, it really would be, we've got to get back to process. I mean, we're $34.5 trillion in debt. This budget, I say it's the height of immorality to replace that level of debt on my 14-year-old son, on my 11-year-old daughter, and on successive generations. We've got to have folks that will get back there, demonstrate some backbone, and say no. And I've created a contract with the state of Utah. There are 7 points in there, one of which is, I will not vote for an omnibus spending bill, a continuing resolution. We can't do it. We can't do this We've got to get back to process. It starts first in taking over the majority in January 25, President Trump, and having enough Republicans, not just with R's next to their name, but folks that are going to make sure we don't have a Mitch McConnell 2.0 as the leader.
Almost everywhere I've gone in this state, everyone comes up and says, why is government so divisive? The one thing I would change is to get back to constitutional principles of limited government. The reason that will help with divisiveness is because most things should be handled locally. Most things should be handled at the state. And we put too many things on the federal government to where everything seems to be at its most tightest, highest, hardest, where you have the most division between states. If everything was back to local, Utah, we have a great government here. We can do things the way we want to do it. California can do things the way they want to do it. And we don't have to spend time in Washington fighting with each other to try to ram one or the other's viewpoint down the other's throat. And that's why the Constitution was designed to have limited government and push things to the state. We need to get back to that. The federal government can't do everything for us.
I can remember very clearly, I was probably 5 years old. I can remember the room, I can remember the paint on the wall, I can remember the furniture. As my father sat down, a World War II veteran, and explained to me why he loved this country. And that instilled within me a patriotism. If I could change one thing, it's the rising generation's lack of patriotism. It's the rising generation's lack of understanding that three things aren't free. They like three things. They like free education, they like free health care, and they don't know where it comes from. And if I could change just one thing, we would do a better job of teaching the next generation the things that were taught to us that made this country so great.
Over the last almost year, I've traveled all over the state and talked to elected officials, but I've also talked to everyday citizens and small business owners. And there is a complaint that comes from all of them. And it's the biggest headwind that they have for success in their daily lives has now become the federal government. And we all know it. And the one thing, I mean, all of these are good things, and I'll subscribe to all of them, but I would just say this. Our leaders in Washington, D.C. do not fundamentally understand separation of powers and need to return power back to the states and back to the people in this country. Because it's very clear what our Constitution says about what the federal government should and shouldn't do. And our federal government is so far out of its lane that it's actually causing this lack of patriotism. It's causing this lack of commitment to the country because all of this power that's been sucked to Washington, D.C. has sucked the life out of our economy and small businesses in this state. So, thanks.
Thank you. I just got distracted because, where's he at? Senator Lee's here. There he is. Can you give him a hand? He just is It's weird to see him here because typically when I see him, it's in the Nike outlet down at Traverse Mountain. This will be to Trent first. Give us your opinion or where do you stand regarding statesmanship versus politics?
Interesting question. Statesmanship versus politics. Look, I've been asked a lot now on the campaign trail, are you going to compromise? Are you going to be able to reach across the aisle and work with other people? And my response, frankly, to that has been, look, I'm not going back to D.C. to make friends. I'm going to make change. And for far too long, we've had people in our party, it hasn't just been the Democrats, it's been in our party, like Mitch McConnell, that have been far too willing to be co-opted by the Democrats and be pulled along. And that has to stop. It has to stop. And I think, with respect to compromise, there is absolutely an ability to do that. But my definition of compromise is, hey, look, we're looking at objectively pursuing the same thing, the same outcome. You just might have a different idea than I do about how to get there. But far too often in the country today, especially with the progressive left and establishment Republicans, they have a totally different idea. They don't want a balanced budget. They don't want these other things. And so we cannot compromise with those folks.
Thank you.
There really shouldn't be a difference between the two, because a statesman is someone who's just been effective in politics. The job of a politician is to, one, have a core set of beliefs, stick to those beliefs, and find a way to get those through Congress and get the president to sign it. Now, you're not going to do that if you're constantly making enemies. I learned that when I was at Columbia Law School. I walked into that law school the first day of school, and it was a picture of my father on the board of one of the student organizations with concentric circles around his face and a dart stuck in his forehead. I realized this is going to be a tough 3 years. I chose instead to be a statesman, and I made friends with almost everyone in my law school. I did not change my core values one bit. And I made a few people change their minds. I did a lot of good there. I didn't change one bit, but we got things done. I think a statesman is someone who has learned the art of politics, and we need more people like that. Thank you.
I'm just going to brag a little bit. I was just awarded an award for being the 9th most effective legislator in the Republican House. And if I can do this in 60 seconds, I want to tell you about an experience. I was working on a public lands bill, and there was a Democrat that opposed my bill. So I went to see him, and I laid out the maps on the table, and I looked him in the eye, and I said, I want you to not hate my bill. He told me 4 reasons why he hated my bill. We went back to work in my office, and we worked on those 4 reasons. We came up with solutions that actually made my bill a better bill. He not only didn't oppose my bill, he voted for my bill. To me, that's statesmanship, and that's what you'll get from John Curtis.
Well, I think we all agree that statesmanship is an important part of this job, and listening to other people is important. But let's have an honest conversation about what's going on in this country right now. We have $34 trillion in debt. We see back in Washington, D.C., phony conservatives going along with Biden and liberal Democrats to create an agenda that's taking this country down the wrong path over and over and over again. You see spending bills that pass with Republicans going along with it that are causing that debt to get worse. And we have a problem in Washington, D.C. We have go along to get along Republicans that, in the name of statesmanship, are taking us down a path of policy that's leading this country off of a cliff. So if I have to choose between being tough and getting this country back on track and doing the right thing around policy and budgeting, that's the path that I'm going to choose. And it was already said once, but I'm applying for a job to go back to Washington, D.C. and fix things. I'm not going back to Washington, D.C. to be part of an elite club or to have friends. We have got serious problems in this country, folks, and we need to send people back there that are going to fight and fight hard and fix them.
So I'm just going to start with this little precursor that I have lived in Utah for 35 years, but I was raised a Mormon in New York. And I understand that we can oftentimes find ways to work with people who may not see the world the way that we do, who may not speak the way that we do, who may not be willing or have had the background that we've had. But I will tell you, the Constitution was the negotiated middle for the founding of this nation. And if we are standing together on the Constitution, as Brent said, we can, without moving, we can find ways to bring people our way. And we will never, ought to never, compromise on what is true and what is right, while still conducting ourselves in a civil manner, as long as we are not giving in to these, as everybody up here has said, to these policies that are leading our country down the path that is absolutely untenable, unsustainable, and the wrong thing for the next generation.
Okay, something recently about that. There's a House bill to ban TikTok. How did you vote in that case? How would you have voted? We'll start with, I think, are we on Trent this time or are we on Brent? Okay, I think it's Brent. I think you're right.
All right, I want everybody to be careful about things like TikTok, okay? because we have to guard our First Amendment freedoms here. But that particular bill, as I understand it, and Senator Lee can correct me if they've changed it now, as I understood it, had provisions in it that gave the president power to make the decisions unilaterally on what he would ban going forward. Isn't that correct? That should be a frightening thing to you, particularly with Joe Biden in the White House. Something we don't need to do is give a Democratic president who has already trampled on our individual rights, who hasn't secured our border, more power over our lives and what we get to see and what we get to do. Because the next step will be what they've done with some of the other social media and stomp all over conservative voices. He cannot have that power, and you should not be fooled by that type of legislation.
Well, I have a little bit of an unfair advantage because that bill actually came through my committee and I know it in pretty good detail. And you'll notice as bills come out of committee, if you expect perfection from them, you're never going to have a single bill. That's why we have them in the process. Certainly, I would be open to an amendment that would change that with the President of the United States. But let me tell you what happened the day we voted on that bill out of committee. TikTok locked all of their users out of TikTok and demanded before they get onto TikTok, they put in their zip code and call their member of Congress. Now that should scare every one of you. Imagine if that was election day and before 100 million people could get on TikTok, they were required to watch a movie by China. That's why I supported this. Now also let me be very clear. This was not a ban on TikTok. This was simply forcing the ownership sale of TikTok to somebody who was not an enemy of the United States. All of you know social media is out of control. All of you know the state has wrestled with this, and the federal government has wrestled with this. This is a bill that needs to work, but I was proud to support it, and I think all of you are counting on us to solve this very difficult problem back in Washington.
I appreciate the comments that have been made, and I think we all know that making laws is a messy business. And we all know that TikTok is giving the Communist Chinese Party information about Utahns, information about our kids, and that's very problematic. But it's also problematic to create legislation where you delegate authority from the legislative branch to an executive or bureaucrats, and Washington, D.C. is expert at that right now. When we talk about and worry about the growth in bureaucracy and the growth in the power of bureaucracy over our lives, there's no better example of a bill like this, where instead of doing the heavy lifting, we see Congress passing the buck, passing the ball to bureaucrats and executives and other branches of government. I said at the beginning that one of the things Congress is failing to understand is separation of powers. We would never stand for as much delegation of power to the bureaucracy in Utah as you see in Washington, D.C.
I have to agree with what Brad just said. I would also add to that the fact that my understanding of this bill, no, I would not have supported it, is that not only does it give the executive branch the power to shut down a company, but it can be based on a designation determined by that executive branch agent or agency with regard to foreign intervention or interference. And immediately there were calls online to shut down some conservative stations and media organizations because they don't support the war in Ukraine. So this is a dangerous place to go. And as somebody, again, who lived in a country that had just become free, I asked this question of a lot of people. And that was, did you guys believe Pravda? Because of course we know the Soviet newspaper was the one approved news source, and that's what you got. Well, most people didn't believe it, but unfortunately enough did. And we cannot subject ourselves to government censorship ever.
No, I wouldn't support the bill, and I put that out on X right away. And for many of the reasons that have just been stated, I mean, the Congress has for far too long given too much authority to the executive branch. And this is something that they've done. They've now abdicated the responsibility the last 40, 50 years with respect to regulation. And having taken an energy company public, that was a painful experience. That's why I have been championing since the day I got into this race, the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S, which is to say, hey, look, you, three-letter agencies, unelected bureaucrats, You can go ahead and propose rules, but they're not going to have the effect of law until Congress has had the opportunity to vote on them. That one thing, I think, would drastically reduce the amount of regulation we have in this country. The regulatory state is a $4 trillion drag on our economy. It costs the average employer $10,000, $20,000 per employee just to come into compliance with all the garbage that they throw at us. I mean, as a mayor, too, I had to hire 3 more water workers last year just because of the stormwater regulations and the EPA standards. So, no more authority to these unelected bureaucrats to the executive branch.
Here's another one that gains traction off and on. Please share your opinions of term limits.
Okay, I can answer that so quick. I actually want to go back to TikTok just for a second, because I think you see here a microcosm of the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. I think there's probably 2 of us in this room that have actually read the bill, and I'd like to know the suggestions from the others. If this is not the bill, then what is the bill for regulating social media? You can see the difficulty of many of the things that we vote in Washington, D.C. They're not perfect. This is the beauty of the process of amendments and going back and forth between the Senate and the House to get things right. Term limits. Listen, I served for the mayor of Provo for 8 years. I've served in the House for 7 years. I had a number of opportunities to stay as long as I want. I don't like long-term politicians, and I'll support anything that makes that possible.
Thank you.
You know, power was never intended to be given to people back in Washington, D.C. for the amount of time that they have it right now. And you see people back there 30, 40 plus years serving in Congress. And that's not the way our founding fathers ever envisioned it to be. One of the first things I did after I declared my candidacy for the U.S. Senate was sign the term limits pledge, so that we know that we can go back to a spot where we have a citizen legislature, where people go to Washington, serve for a season, and then go back and live with the consequences of what they have done. That is fundamentally the way our country should be operating. But right now, there's so much money, there's so much power, and people turn it into jobs and careers. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that's the way that it should be.
I also support term limits. I will say this, I wish it didn't have to be this way. And I will also add that I support bureaucratic term limits, because I think that is where we have noticed in the past few years that is a big part of the problem. When I was working for the Utah House Majority in Greg Hughes, one of the things that I found, I sat one time in a committee meeting at the back, and there was one representative who was the chair of that committee who had been there quite a while. No one else had been there for long. And there were some bureaucrats from Salt Lake County testifying on some issues. And Eric Hutchings was just holding their feet to the fire on some of his questions. I sent him a text in the middle of it, and I said, Eric, stop being such a jerk. And then the meeting goes on, Turns out they were double dipping. He knew it. Nobody else on the committee knew it because they were too new. And they figured we could just outweight the politicians because we don't keep them around in the House and Senate for too long in Utah. We have to have term limits. We also need to reform our bureaucracy so that they are limited in Washington, D.C.
Yes, I signed the term limit pledge as well. 2 in the Senate, 3 in the House. We got to be able to pass something like that. Look, and I believe in a citizen-led government. That's what our founders envisioned. You know, that people would come in, they would work, they would serve, and they would go home. And when I was able to redesign our council chambers at Riverton City, if you go in there today, you see a copy of the Constitution on the right-hand side of the dais. On the left-hand side, you see the oath of office. That's what we've all sworn to support, obey, and defend. And then at the very back, within view of all elected officials, and I've explained this to those in office in Riverton, my favorite painting is that of George Washington resigning his commission in the Maryland State House, right? And that's a reminder to all of us, hey, this is not a lifetime gig. It shouldn't be. And I do have a lot of issues with respect to this bureaucracy that's been entrenched. And Kash Patel has written in his book, Government Gangsters, a lot of great recommendations on how we can get that turned around.
I know from experience Washington can be an intoxicating place. When I told you about my history, every year I had a president offering me a better job that I couldn't turn down. First, youngest general counsel in the history of government, working in the White House. The one thing I did, and showed at a young age that I had some level of maturity, is I got offered another great job by the president, and I said, I got to get out of this town. My wife and I said, we've got to raise our children in Utah, not in Washington, and I got out. That's a big deal. So my experience is, and the same thing I talked about getting things local. I'm down to a more extreme position where senators should be one term, and then they should come home. Congressmen, 2 terms. And I think one other thing that Carolyn talked about that I thought was really good is the bureaucrats get the agencies and departments out of Washington so they get away from that intoxicating spirit too. President Trump started to do that in his presidency. He got thwarted. He heard everybody screaming bloody murder. Get them out in, like BLM ought to be out here, Interior ought to be out here. They started that and it ought to continue.
This one's, of course, relevant and current. It's kind of a two-parter, so I'd like to give him 2 minutes, if that's okay. Well, which one was I using? What are your feelings on the border? And then there are 10 million that have crossed the border. What do we do with them now?
Well, I think we all know this, but Joe Biden, in his infinite wisdom, within a few days of becoming president, with 90+ executive orders, a stroke of a pen, decided it was in the country's best interest to open up our border. So to say what you would do about the border, we don't actually have a border now, we need to actually get one back. And the reality is, there's a lot of things that need to happen. We need to allow the immigration officials to do their job. And I believe in the short term, we should use the military to go down there because, in fact, we do have an invasion that's happening in this country right now. We don't know who is here, we don't know where they are, we don't know what they're doing, but we do know this. They are costing every American, every taxpayer in this room, a lot of money. It's estimated that each of you that pays taxes this year, your share of the immigration crisis brought to you by Joe Biden is $1,250 a year. And I think that's low. I think it's more than that. He has the power to close the border now. He's choosing not to do it for a lot of reasons, none of which are the right reasons. We need to then address our legal immigration system. But until we close the border, any efforts around that issue are obviously fruitless. The last part, this is impossible to answer in 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
So,
I said that.
I'll just say, I'll say this. I believe that those that are here illegally need to go back and get in line. Someone said to me once, they said, Brad, but that's going to cost a lot of money. And I said, yes, it will. But it's going to cost more if we don't do that. And it's also not right. We have laws in this country. If we choose to purposefully turn a blind eye to them, what credibility do we have on anything else that matters in this country? This is a big issue. Everywhere I go in this state, people care deeply about it. We've got to do better.
Brad, I'm stealing your line about we have no border, because that was good. So we do not have a border. I was down there a year ago with a number of elected officials here in Utah and some other grassroots activists. And we were talking to big border agents. We were talking to people in McAllen, trying to figure out how some of these things can be addressed, what the state could be doing. And the fact of the matter is, we do not have a border. Every single agent there will tell you that 90% of their time is spent meeting the humanitarian needs of those who are coming across. And while they are being distracted, this is a strategy of the cartels, while they are being distracted, drugs and bad people are coming across in other areas. It is completely untenable, and as Brad said, there are all the laws in place for this to be solved. We have a Biden administration that came in and said that they were going to pull back all of the regulations that had been in place in order to ensure that those who were seeking asylum were held in another country. the Remain in Mexico policy. And did any of you see just last night or this morning, I don't even know, that we have the president of Mexico now basically blackmailing our president and saying the flow will continue unless you send more money down to Central America. He literally told us that. And we are being played because we have an executive branch that refuses to do its job. We, as members, well, of Congress, members of Congress have got to do what they can to force the executive branch to pull back spending until they're willing to do what they are meant to do. It is their most fundamental duty to protect the border. And yes, we have those who are here who need to be sent back. There are no other options. I have a son who lives in Japan. I will probably end up I'm waiting for an announcement sometime, with a Japanese daughter-in-law, and she will have to jump through massive hoops to get here. But if she goes to the southern border, she walks across, it's untenable.
Well, look, it's not rocket science, right? Border wall, Remain in Mexico, E-Verify, stop benefits to illegals. We're sitting here with the Biden administration. I mean, unbelievable that he thought that he needed to have a $95 billion bill passed, giving most of that to Ukraine so that he could enforce the law. I remember him saying, give me the power, I'll do it. Give me a break. This is something that he did. This is on him. He undid hundreds of successful policies that were working under President Trump on the very first day. Remember Secretary Mayorkas, who said he was bragging about it on TV. Oh man, we've done so much that we've undone to President Trump. I don't have enough time to sit here and talk about it. So it could have been done by him. He didn't need this monstrous bill. And it's very, very simple. I think with respect to E-Verify, that's very important. You know, how are you going to send these 10+ million people home? And just imagine that. It's like 3 times the population of our state that's invaded our country. And to a large extent, I think through E-Verify, cutting off those benefits, many of them are going to find their way back home. But President Trump is coming up, I know, with a deportation plan. And that's something that, unfortunately, we're going to have to be able to get behind and push. And we've got to be able to maintain our border. We've got to be able to have it so that we have a nation. If we don't have that, we don't. And this is something, too, that with respect to legal immigration, we've been rewarding the wrong behavior. The Biden administration has. And they're just, come on in, yet we have people that are trying to do it the right way, taking 12, 13 years to gain citizenship and paying $40,000, $50,000 to immigration attorneys. I think that's completely wrong. Let's stop rewarding the wrong behavior.
I agree, it's not rocket science. I think with the new Northrop Grumman contract up here, we probably have a few rocket scientists here, maybe send down if it takes that, right? I saw a video of the early Biden administration shortly after Secretary Mayorkas became the Secretary of Homeland Defense. It was very interesting because 3 years ago, and he was bragging about dismantling all the border policies that were in place in the prior administration. Bragging about it. And there's 2 of those that we have to focus on, and as a lawyer I understand these and they're interrelated. One is Remain in Mexico until your asylum claim can be adjudicated. And the other is what a lawyer would call burden of proof. And the Biden administration has changed the burden of proof. Burden of proof is you have to show that you legitimately have an asylum claim. You have to show that you and your family are truly at risk, economically or physically, by your country. And Biden has changed that. Secretary Mayorkas has changed that. That they don't have the burden of proof anymore. All they have to do is say, I feel uncomfortable going home to my country. And instead of remaining in Mexico before the hearing to determine if that's enough, they get what's called an NTA. Now, that sounds great. It's a government thing. It's called a notice to appear, and then you're released into the country. Wow. And we lose them, we don't know where they're here. The prior policies have to be put into place, put back into place. That will stop that And then it becomes a real problem with what we have here. That's a serious problem. No one's really talking about it, that's hard. The first tranche of that is every single person who is here illegally, who has committed a crime, or we determine has been a criminal in their home country. They're gone first, quickly, and then we start addressing the other problems. Thank you.
There is no more clear example of the failure of the Biden administration than the border. What's happening at the border is wrong on every level. I've been there 3 times. I was there several weeks ago. I was more alarmed on my 3rd visit than my 1st visit. And I will agree with the comments that we don't have a border, but let me slightly change that. We do have a border that is enforced. It's just by the cartels, not the U.S. government. They decide who comes in, when they come in, and under what conditions they come in, and if they come in. That is wrong on every level. As you know, they charge these people to come into our country between $6,000 and $60,000. And you might ask, what's the difference between a $6,000 entry and a $60,000? 2 things. It's almost like going to a travel agency and picking a package. Oh, you want to walk? Okay, it's $6,000. You want to ride? It's more. If you're from Asia, it's $60,000. They're making tens of millions of dollars per sector on our policy. And it's wrong. And it's worse than that. As these people come into our country illegally, they can't work. So the cartels get them jobs and then take 30% of their wages. So what do we do about it? This is the real hard thing, right? So we're looking for leverage points as the Republicans in the House with a 1-seat majority to force President Biden to do what we all know he should do. You've heard some of the answers. The number one to me is remain in Mexico. That's what they all told me down there. The Border Patrol, everybody I talked to said, if you can implement remain in Mexico, 90% goes away. We had a chance with our budget bill to attach some of these issues with it that would have forced President Biden's hand. And there's a reason that a number of us didn't vote for it. There's a number of reasons, but one of them was we did not use that leverage point. As Republicans with a small majority, we have to stick together, find a leverage point, and force the administration to know what they should do. Now I'm running out of time. Let me just quickly go to a few other points. Never mind. I yield my time.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. All right, I think we're Carol on this one this year. Is that correct, Brad?
We must, I don't.
Okay. What, where are we? Say that again. Except. Yeah, 1 minute. Yeah. Give us your opinion of supporting or genesising, that's a big word, a bill that prohibits U.S. land sales to any foreign country.
Okay, supporting or what?
Genesising, starting.
Oh.
Genesis, first book of the Bible. That's,
Yeah.
I make words up, that's fine.
Okay, you did make that one up. I gotta tell you, I'm pretty good at English. You made that one up. So, let's see. Okay, no, we have a problem. We can't. There are a lot of countries around the world we cannot own and possess land in. And there is no reason why we should be allowing China, who we know is an enemy who would really like to take us over, permitting them to buy land in our country. And we know that they have large swaths of our farmland. We absolutely need laws in place. That's kind of cut and dry. And I think we need to be taking a look at all land sales when it comes to foreign ownership to a great degree, whether it serves the interests of the American people or not.
Thank you.
No, China shouldn't own 1 square inch. Not one. And I know that our state legislature has made efforts. I mean, Representative Perucci, who's out of Overton, had forwarded some legislation the last couple of years to get rid of the Confucius Institutes at universities, thankfully, right? That they've been using kind of a subterfuge to go ahead and push their policies and their agenda. And secondly, to stop the sale of land to communist China. And that's one of the bigger concerns, too, with respect to this TikTok bill. I mean, this is something Senator Tommy Tuberville talked about when he was out here with me, and he said, look, there's a lot of other pressing issues, too. We got 300 people a day being killed by fentanyl because of it coming from China. We've got over 50,000 Chinese nationals that come through the border that we know, many of which are up to no good, right? That we need to be able to take care of and secure. And of course, then the ownership of these lands, many of which are close to military bases or installations and pose a huge security risk. So we have to recognize it for what it is.
I come at this from a slightly different angle because I think this is a complete dereliction of duty with the Biden administration and their deficit spending, $3 trillion that they put us further into debt in just the last year or two. Let me have to tell you why, because we have to service that debt. We have to pay interest. And the interest on that debt, the service is almost, well, Forbes magazine last week said it's now as big as our military budget. That's insane. Well, guess who used to buy our debt? China. They don't even trust our debt anymore. So what have they done? They've been pretty smart. They moved to hard assets. And now they're buying farmland, they're buying other land near military bases, they're buying land near airports because Joe Biden started with a deficit spending that we can't afford. We now have to deal with the next problem, which is the Chinese buying up sensitive lands. We can't let that happen.
Good. I want to just save some time and agree with everything that's been said and do a quick pivot. And there's 2 points that I'd like to make. I told you how I feel about China. You know there's a warrant for my arrest there. I push back on the theft of intellectual property, of our data, the taking the freedom. But when we talk about this, I think it's really important to define something very clearly. Having spent 3 years in that part of the world, I love the Chinese people. I love the Chinese culture. It's not the Chinese people we have a problem with. It's a dictatorship that in many cases is as oppressive to their own people as they are to other people in the world. So I just want to clarify that. The second thing I want to clarify is, yes, I worry about China and taking our land, but I actually worry more about the federal government taking our land than anybody else. And I'm just telling you, as a representative of 90% federal land, this is a huge problem. And I want to tell you about 2 quick bills that I have. The first one is to restrict NACs in Utah and make sure they can't be here in Utah. If you don't know what they are, Google it, it will scare you. And the second one is to repeal the BLM rule, which basically gives them free rein to put conservation easements in, much like the president would do in Antiquities Act. I'm out of time.
Well, I think the easy answer to this question is been there, done that. When I was Speaker of the House, I pulled 3 lawmakers into my office, one of which is Representative Perucci, Representative Brammer, Representative Wilcox, and we talked about this issue in Utah. We talked about the fact that we had Confucius Institutes, which were indoctrinating our students. We had Confucius Institutes that were creating problems across the state through our universities. And we had the Chinese government buying land across the state, in particular, adjacent to sensitive installations in Utah. So we outlawed in this state. And that's the kind of leadership that we need in Washington, D.C. But unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., we're so distracted with doing things that the federal government shouldn't be doing that we're not paying attention to the things we should be doing. We need people back there that are clear-eyed about the role of the federal government to do the heavy lifting and stop spending time on policies and programs that don't get our country safer and more secure.
Trent starts with this one. Do you support, or what are your thoughts on DEI?
No, I don't support DEI. Look, for 10, 11 months now, I've been campaigning. And on that website again, I will champion every day, as you're saying, there's smaller, limited governments, safer families, and stronger economies. And the policy prescriptions that I've outlined for those overarching themes in safer families is one, get rid of the Department of Education. Please, let's stop talking about it, let's do it. Second Amendment, and then also, I say we need a separation between woke and state. And Congress has to be able to enact this. They've got the power of the purse. They can do it. We need to be able to pass legislation that precludes or prevents these agencies from pushing these things down. It's a very insidious practice. And we can do it. We can do it. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has wholeheartedly endorsed many of these things. They pushed it to our military. They pushed it to education and many other areas. So we've got to have folks that are going to be able to stand up and say, nope, we're not going to do this.
DEI is another example of people choosing words that sound nice for bad policy. When I was at Columbia Law School, I was excited. I'd come from BYU, and I had been brainwashed to say that liberals would have open minds, and I was really excited to go back there and start sharing ideas. I got there, and I've never met more closed-minded people in my life. Diversity doesn't mean to them diversity of thought. Equity doesn't mean true equity of opportunity. They bastardized those terms. Sorry about speaking French.
Amen.
And we need to get back to some common sense and get rid of these types of policy. DEI should DIE.
Any policy, any mandate, any teaching that tells us that somebody needs a shortcut because of their race is not only wrong, it's demeaning to those in that race. Likewise, any policy, any teaching, any doctrine that says you should be ashamed because of your achievements, because of your race, is also wrong and demeaning. Some people call that DEI, I call it wrong.
Well, he did that on purpose.
Tricky Brent. So, in the summer of 2020, we've just done a number of special sessions. I actually called with President Adams another special session. And in that special session, we made it against the law in Utah for our educators to teach the nefarious and the problematic DEI and CRT curriculum that we saw going across this country and even starting to show up in our schools. And that's the kind of policy that I think we need to make sure other states have. This is something, however, that I'm just going to say, I don't think the federal government has a role in this. This is something that the states need to be responsible for. We continue to try, part of the reason the federal government keeps getting all this power is we keep pushing the problems of America and our communities up to the federal government to solve our problems. That is not the American way. States need to solve these problems like Utah has.
So states need to solve these problems, I agree, but we've gotten where we are because too many states are willing to take a couple bucks to give away our sovereignty. And it is not good enough. We have a federal government, frankly, that doesn't have any money left. So it's probably a good time to start taking a look at where we can cut the strings. Do you know when it comes to education in this state? Somewhere between 6 and 9% of our funding comes from the federal government, depending on the year. 6 to 9%, yet they control 100% of our education system. It makes absolutely no sense. And I'll tell you, we've got to be smarter than the Democrats when it comes to nice sounding words. When I made my announcement that I was running, I talked to a bunch of young liberal reporters, and one of the points that I made to them, and they loved it, is the fact of the matter is the Republican Party and the things that we believe in actually respect the diversity of the individual. We need to use the nice sounding words and we need to use them as they're meant to be used and teach and preach.
Okay, trying to get this, no, I think we ended here, Brent, we'll get this next one. Yeah, oh, Trent still needs to go, okay. No, he started, okay. All right, what's in this water bottle?
Maybe none of us are qualified, we can't keep this straight.
There you go. Okay. I'd like to give 2 minutes on this next question. It's on climate change, but climate change, I mean, is very broad. It has a lot of tentacles in the way it affects our economy and our lives. And so I'm not going to dictate which tentacle you would like to bash or educate us on. But if you'd like to talk about your view or your opinion on climate change and what it is doing to our economy and our country.
Well, climate change has become fighting words. And for a good reason, because part of what we've been talking here all night, you know, our federal government is supposed to be a limited government. And here's another problem, which we are trying to use the federal government to force a certain ideology down our throats. We're now being pushed for hard on electric cars, and what's happened? General Motors is like, we can't survive, we can't make a profit off this. We find out that solar isn't quite the energy source that we thought it was. I'm a believer in entrepreneurships. I'm a believer in the individual. I'm a believer that when government gets involved, it's usually done less. We have smart people. We have smart people in this state. And when smart people in businesses with profit motive in our capitalist system attack a problem, they usually find an answer. And that's where we should go, rather than the government throwing us down a road where we're not prepared completely to do it yet. And we're going too fast. The petroleum industry understands this, and we need to slow down and let the market work. Thank you.
One of my favorite things to do in Washington is go back and say to my Democratic colleagues, you know, I represent a county called Carbon County. And then I smile and I say, what do you suppose they do in Carbon County? And then I double down on it. Does anybody know what our state rock is? Coal. So there's a problem here though, and that is Republicans hate the word climate. So we run from it and we're not part of the dialogue. I realize that that's been a mistake. And as I've dug into this, this is my aha moment that I hope all of you take away. If you take away nothing else of what I said tonight, this is my aha moment. Republicans are the best in the world on this issue. And our policies and the things that we would put into place actually reduce more emissions than our Democratic colleagues. You want a quick fact? The natural gas that we produce here in the United States burns 40% cleaner than that produced in Russia. So what if we exported our US natural gas to replace Russian natural gas? We would reduce more emissions than the entire Green New Deal, fuel our economy, make other countries dependent on us for energy, and we would become energy dominant. And by the way, we reduce emissions. Nuclear, geothermal, hydro, we're actually very good at this. We just hate to talk about it. So I leaned into it, and I get criticized for this. But I get a seat at the table on climate because I'm willing to talk about it, and I'm willing to take them on these issues. And more, I'm changing the dialogue, not just here in Utah, not just in Washington, but around the world, that our natural resources here in Utah are not the problem. They're actually part of the solution. And the more we lean into this, the more power we will have, and the more we will be able to change a very flawed energy policy. Well, let me take that back. We don't have an energy policy in the United States. We have a climate policy. As Republicans, unless we dig into this and lean into this, we will lose.
We should all be upset about this. When Joe Biden became president, he basically shut down all new domestic oil and gas production in this country. And we were energy independent at that time. We are now not an energy independent country. We are dependent on other countries, some of which are our adversaries. And then Joe Biden made things worse. He drained our strategic oil reserves, and then the war in Ukraine broke out, and we watched what's happened at that point. We even watched the President of the United States, and I never thought I would see this, go begging hat in hand to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, asking him to produce more oil for the United States of America. And the Crown Prince told President Biden to pack sand, no pun intended. It's not, this energy policy of the President is taking us down, we know it, a dead-end street. And here's the problem. We know that the solution to our energy problems and challenges in this country, many of which can be solved here in Utah. As Republicans, we cannot cede any ground on this issue to the Democrats. We have to be firm and resolute in our conviction that we need to be energy independent as a country. That is the thing that matters the most. Now, we can do things like we did a year and a half ago when I was Speaker. We invested a small amount of money to create a research center. I was just there yesterday in Emery County, where the state, working with some really smart scientists, are trying to find ways for us to use coal in a different way that can solve some of the energy challenges of the future. But Utah is rich in natural resources, and we can be part of the solution to this in a way that I don't think any of us even imagine. But we cannot drink the Kool-Aid of the Biden administration.
Well, there's the bag.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I think I'm done.
So this is one of my favorite topics. I think I spent 30 or 40 minutes on it at one of my town halls last night down south. I will tell you, we will solve our energy problems when we allow the free market to solve our energy problems. And I don't know if we have as many problems as we're being told. By the way, I've asked a lot of liberals over the years who believe in the climate change hoax, the global warming hoax, what the IPCC is. I've never met a Democrat who actually knows. I've met a whole lot of conservatives who do. This policy, these policies have been driven by the UN. The IPCC is out of the UN, based on, I won't get into too much detail, but based on models. I've been writing about this issue and talking to smart scientists about this issue for over 20 years, based on models that came out of the UN, and nobody has ever gone back, except for some conservatives, and taken a look at if those models actually bore true. Because guess what? None of them have. All of these predictions were made based on very complicated scientific modeling that did not give us what we needed. I think most of you in this room know what a catalytic converter is. My dad and his colleagues have the patents on the catalytic converter. I will tell you, we want to solve these problems. We solve these problems through private markets, innovation, not directing government money. That's why we are where we are, because government has said, here are the winners, here are the losers, and we do worse at solving the problems that we all want to face. My family is responsible for more of the clean air that we all experience than all of the politicians in the world combined, and it was done through free markets.
Well, I, for one, do not subscribe to climate alarmism. And I think Republican voters ought to soundly reject those that do, right? I mean, how many tens of trillions of dollars have they estimated it would take to go ahead and get us to, carbon neutral? And at what cost? Beyond just the dollar amount. This is the destruction of our economy. And for what reason? Because we know that China and India and some of these other countries are going to play by the same set of rules. So as has been said here, I think this is something that has been driven by large global organizations that want to try to diminish America and bring everybody else up. And we can't just keep going along with it. I mean, this is, I think, being in a company too, on the board of a company that we took public in the energy space that owned midstream oil and gas assets, I tell you, the answer to this is very simple. It's drill, baby, drill. That's what's going to get our economy back on track, and it's going to help us with this Bidenomics, right? Combat inflation. Those are the two best things that we can do, is to go ahead and get super abundant energy sources going again in this country, which we have under President Trump. And why I wholeheartedly endorse President Trump from last summer. We had less than $2 a gallon gasoline. Who remembers that? Right? We can get there again, and we can do it. But we've got to have the right people in office. We've got to have leadership on this issue. This is something why the Oil and Gas Workers Association of America has endorsed my candidacy, because I support domestic energy production, and we need to be able to do that. What the government can do, because I agree that the government in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it delineates those roles and responsibilities that we the people have given the federal government. They far exceeded what our founders ever envisioned, so they're really failing to do those things now because they're doing everything else. But we've got to get that RAINS Act passed. We've got to cut the regulatory state. Just take a chainsaw to it, I've been saying, for the last 10, 11 months, and that's going to drastically help.
Thank you. We're probably only going to have, there's a bunch of questions up here we're not going to get to, and I apologize. We're probably going to do one or two more questions. And we didn't plan on Senator Lee being here. But Mike, would you mind, when we're done with the questions, just taking a few minutes and speaking to us? Okay, thank you. I think we're John or Brent? John, okay, to start this one. Do you support more financial support for Ukraine, and or why or why not? Let's do 2 minutes on
This
this.
is a complicated issue. Listen, another great example of the failure of the Biden administration. I'm curious, can anybody in this room tell us what the objective is in Ukraine? The Biden administration has not articulated what our objective is. How can we ask American tax people for money when we don't know what the objective is? Does anybody know what the accountability is or the guardrails for these dollars? So listen, these are important concerns of people. Now at the same time, I'm very concerned. I am not willing to give Putin a victory, and I am not willing to send a message to President Xi that we will back off when we say we're going to protect somebody. We need to finish this thing in Ukraine, and we need to articulate what our goal is, and we need to put guardrails around the dollars, and if we do that, I'll support funding.
So I see the tremendous benefits of stopping Putin. He's a thug, he's a war criminal, but I think we've got our priorities backwards. And if we're going to see more funding flow to Ukraine, the issues around strategy need to be clear, the issues around transparency and accountability need to be clear, but there's another issue that needs to be resolved before I would be supportive of sending tens and hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine when we don't have a closed border in the United States. That issue needs to be resolved before we can help other people close and protect their borders.
I agree, our priorities are completely upside down. I saw a report saying that the average age of a soldier in Ukraine was 42, and a couple months later, I saw that it's 52. I think we have what is estimated that 2 million Ukrainians have fled the country because they aren't interested in fighting. And by the way, there were 2 opportunities from what I understand for Ukraine and Russia to settle this, and we said no. I don't think that I verified this actually with a friend who's in the CIA and another who works in the defense industry, and they both said this is correct, that in our own military, we are years delayed in the manufacture of some of our significant weapons systems that we would need to defend ourselves, as well as with our ammunition. I do not think that we are situated, after years and years of kicking the can down the road, refusing to appropriately build our military as we should be, and bankrupting our country. I don't think we're situated to do what some would like to do in Ukraine. It makes absolutely no sense for us to be focused there at all. We need to get out. If Europe thinks it's a real threat, then it's time for Europe to step up.
No, I don't. Look, I've been saying this since day one, and I'm not in support of funding this war. I'm just not. And we've got to stop this. We're almost 80 years past World War II. And the American taxpayer, you and I, are largely charged with still funding so many operations and security apparatus in Europe. That needs to stop. And I would say that even beyond that, I mean, we've got a $6 billion accounting errors too. That's a huge problem. And $5 billion we're finished our own wall. So we can't continue to just give money to folks where there's zero accountability, first and foremost. And secondly, we've got to be in a position where Europe is providing for its own security, and Rick Grinnell, the former ambassador to Germany and director of national intelligence, and of course my campaign as well, said, look, we've got to stop admitting countries to NATO too that aren't paying their fair share. I mean, they're supposed to be paying 2% of their GDP towards their defense. They're not doing it. One thing that President Trump did so successfully was to go ahead and get them paying their fair share. And that's why we need him back in office. I truly believe if President Trump were in office today, we would not have the problem we have in Ukraine. I think he is going to solve this problem within days of resuming office in 2025. And we got to have this core of America First constitutional conservatives in the Senate that are going to go ahead and support that effort. I think it's also very problematic that Congress is the only one with a constitution that can declare war. And we've had executives in this nation that have just gone ahead and authorized military use without Congress's approval. And that is absolutely wrong. As your senator, I'm going to stand up for that and ensure that that comes back, that we come back to the constitutionality of ever sending troops, especially and ammunition to other countries.
I told you I worked for, must be really excited about this one. I told you I worked for President Reagan. Remember the slogan, peace through strength? I totally agree that if President Trump, the reason we didn't have a problem with Russia is because he exuded strength. He exuded a lot of other things too, but he did exude strength. President Reagan, peace through strength meant Gorbachev take down this wall, it came down. It meant no war with Russia. It meant the complete dissolution of the Soviet Union. Okay? So that's number one. Two, it's a much more complex question than what's been left here. We've put $135 million into Ukraine. The European Economic Union has not matched that. The Economist magazine, which is a left-of-center magazine, said a couple of things. For most of January and February, they've been complaining about the EU because they've been trickling dollars into Ukraine. They talk a big story about how important that they put virtually nothing in it. We put in 75 times more than France. This is wrong. This is why Donald Trump said, NATO, you've got to pay your 2%. Last year, NATO still only had 18 of 31 countries that had got the 2%. So what I think Xi is looking at, he is looking at it is, I got a better chance of Taiwan because of what the U.S. is doing, because we've depleted our military reserves. We're not ready anymore. We've got a budget deficit, so we can't get those reserves replenished. We got a problem on our southern border, which is extraordinarily expensive, and we need to be ready for other things that happen. Wow, other things might happen. What just happened? Haiti. What's next? We're not ready for it, and we need to be, and in the meantime, Europe needs to pay its fair share, and it isn't wrong to say we're not stepping up until you do.
Thank you. I think we'll end on that question. There's some really good ones here. You know, I don't know that I've ever been as impressed with 5 people since last week when I was with my city council. Let's give them a big hand. And with that hand, Senator Lee, would you mind coming up and taking a few minutes? Let's give him a hand as well.
Thanks so much. If I had known I would speak tonight, I would have dressed a little nicer for you, but I hope this is okay. But I will say, I am well dressed in one respect. I'm wearing my Article 1, Section 8 Nikes. The best birthday present that Sharon and my kids gave me the best birthday present ever last year. They got me the world's only pair of Article 1, Section 8 dunks. So it reminds me all the time of what Congress's powers are and what they're not. It really is such a pleasure and honor to be here tonight. We have an embarrassment of riches here. I hope everyone appreciates the extent to which we benefit from having a cast of candidates who are this well-informed and this thoughtful in all of their answers. And I deeply appreciate that from each of you. A couple things stood out that really made me happy. I lost track of the number of times the need to return to federalism and separation of powers was brought up. I know I'm a broken record about this, but I'm going to continue to be a broken record about this as long as I'm still alive and until the federal government repents. And believe me, it needs to repent. But you know, it's the most important feature of the Constitution in the sense that the Bill of Rights matter and the other protections matter a lot, but none of them mean anything. As Justice Scalia used to say, that Any tin-horn dictator can have a Bill of Rights, but whether it's worth more than the paper it's printed on has everything to do with whether you have structural protections in place that make sure that no one person or group acquires too much power. And it's like we've done the exact opposite of what we were supposed to do with this government. When our founders set it up, they knew that the risk of abuse and accumulation of power would be the greatest at the national level, and that's why they sliced it and they diced it. They set up these twin structural protections. One vertical, that we call federalism, basically the 10th Amendment and stuff that was implicit in the original text, and the other separation of powers that says within the federal government we're going to have 3 distinct branches. One branch, the branch where I work, and the branch where one of these folks will be working next year, makes the laws. And we're the most dangerous branch. And we know that because the Founding Fathers made sure that that was where the action happened and that that was the branch of government where the people would be most in control, the most accountable to the people at the most regular intervals. You can fire every member of the House every 2 years and a third of the Senate every 2 years. And so they didn't entrust that to many other people, any other people. In fact, the very first operative provision says that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, and explain that means the House and the Senate. And then they made that doubly clear in Article 1, Section 7. You cannot make a federal law except by following the formula. Passage in the House, passage in the Senate of the same text. Doesn't matter which order unless it's a revenue bill, but then you present it to the president. Without that, you can't make a law. We've messed it all up. The vertical protection, we messed up because they said we'd have only a few powers, war, Army, Navy, National Guard stuff, immigration stuff, weights and measures, postal roads, interstate and foreign commerce and trade, and that's about it. And since 1937, we have completely messed with that. We have arrogated to ourselves, we, Congress, arrogated to the federal government the power to regulate, in addition to all of that stuff, labor, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, health, safety, welfare. Sky's the limit if we can dream it. If we've got decent lawyers, we can draft it in a way that the Supreme Court will leave it alone. And all of a sudden, everything is federal. And because everything is federal, Congress gets lazy and says we don't want to be on the hook for all that stuff because you make one group of friends but a bigger set of enemies every time you pass a new law. So we stop passing real laws and we start passing fake ones. We shall have fair labor practices, and we hereby give that to the NLRB. We shall have fair trade practices. We give that to the FTC. Over time, we shall have clean air. We give that to the EPA. Before you know it, that government is costing us so much money that we have to work 3 or 4 months out of every year just to pay our federal taxes. Then we're told that's not enough because we're $34.5 trillion in debt. And then on top of that, everything we buy is more expensive because $3 to $4 trillion a year is what we as consumers shell out for higher prices on everything we buy because of those stupid federal regulations. By the way, fun fact, you want to know how many pages of new law the executive branch bureaucratic pinheads turn out every year? 100,000. I keep a stack of them in my office. It's a monument to evil, really. A reminder of what not to do. And that stuff can get you thrown in prison if you don't follow it. It can shut down your business. It can get you fined millions of dollars if you don't follow it. And yet you're not on notice for that stuff because who has time to read 100,000 pages a year? And I will tell you, I read a lot of that stuff. It's boring. You wouldn't want to read all that. You shouldn't have to. But the government is no longer ours because of this. So what do we do about it? It's too big, it's too expensive, it's too intrusive, and it's there to mess with us in many circumstances where it shouldn't. And another fun fact, before I get to the bright side of it, because there is a bright side, I promise. Another fun fact, a few years ago, a couple of us on the Judiciary Committee wanted to find out how many federal crimes are on the books. How many ways are there to get thrown in federal prison for committing a federal crime? So we asked the people that you ask in that circumstance. There's an office called the Congressional Research Service. Their whole job, their whole reason for existence is to answer obscure questions like that we need to know when making laws and exercising oversight. Took them a couple months, they got back to us and they said, okay, We don't know how to tell you this, but the answer is unknown and unknowable. We cannot tell you how many federal crimes are on the books, but rest assured, we can tell you there are at least 300,000 federal crimes on the books because of all these regulatory edicts that are put out there. Men and women, not of your own choosing, who don't work for you, wrote them. You know, Madison said in Federalist 62, it'll be of little avail to the people if the laws be written by individuals of their own choosing, if those laws are so voluminous, complex, and ever-changing that they can't reasonably read them and understand them. So Madison's words proved eerily prophetic, but even worse than he warned, because they're not even written by people of our own choosing. And that's why I was so glad that I also lost track of the number of times the REINS Act was plugged. The REINS Act is the ultimate solution to this. And I'm so happy that this is probably the only cast of candidates in any Senate race in the United States right now where every single member put in a plug for the REINS Act and explained it, so I don't even have to explain what that does to them. They did it much better than I do, because I tend to bore people to death when I explain stuff like that. So that would solve a lot of the regulatory problem. Now, about the spending problem, that also came out, but I love the answers here too. But it's so much worse than you could ever imagine. So, Brad served in the legislature for a long time. Brad and I were both elected to office at the same time back in 2010. He was in the legislature for a long time. I envy the way they do it in the legislature, because they decide how much they're going to spend based on how much they have, and then they spend that. Can you imagine? It's crazy, revolutionary. They actually do that, and they cut taxes along the way, which is really cool. The way it works in Washington is so much worse than I ever could have imagined. When I first ran for office in 2010, remember when Obamacare was passed, lovely lady Nancy Pelosi had infamously recently said, you gotta pass it to find out what's in it. And I thought that was horrendous. It was a 2,700-page bill to remake fundamentally a major swath of the American economy. She was saying, pass it first, then find out what's in it. You don't have time to read it, and too bad. That's by design. I thought, surely that is an aberration. Surely that's unusual, because no sane group of people would ever operate in an environment where that wasn't the case. Well, it happens a lot. In fact, it happened to me less than a week ago. John experienced it too, and John and I both voted the same way on that, which is heck no, which is strong language where I come from. But we had known for months that this moment was coming. We had known for, 6 or 8 weeks that part of the federal government, occupying about 70% of discretionary federal spending, would be decided, and that existing funding streams would run out on the 22nd, at midnight on the 22nd of March, exactly 1 week ago. They were supposed to give us the language weeks in advance. They didn't, they never do. Then they promised we'll get it to you the previous weekend, so you can have a weekend to review it. They were supposed to give it to us Sunday, then they said Sunday night. Monday morning, came and went. Monday evening, came and went. Still don't have it. Tuesday morning, Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening. At 2:32 a.m. on Thursday, the day before the government's going to shut down, they send out a bill, 1,012 pages long, spends $1.3 and $1.4 trillion. Things got earmarks all over the place. Earmarks that 2 weeks earlier had included such gems as $3.5 million for parade float construction in some Podunk town in Michigan, $2.5 million for an earmark for outdoor recreation, specifically to wit, kayaking and slalom events for the town of Franklin, New Hampshire. And my personal favorite, $1 million for a BDSM sex club in Philadelphia. You can't make this stuff up. This thing is written by a very corrupt process. A very small handful of appropriators, members of the House and Senate Appropriations Committee, put it together. Most of them don't even get much input in it. It's mostly the law firm. I call it the law firm of Schumer, McConnell, Johnson, and Jeffries. also known, the shorthand is the firm. The firm gets together and they decide what's going to be in it. They allow it to be written, then they deliberately keep it secret from the rest of us, then they release it with only hours to go before a previously arranged, entirely contrived government shutdown, always on the immediate eve of a long-scheduled holiday and recess, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and so forth. This is how they do it. And then they come out and it sounds something like this. We know you'd all like to have amendments. I'm not going to tell you which member of the firm I'm going to. But he always makes sure there's something in there for distillers of Kentucky bourbon and racehorses. I'm not going to tell you which one of the firm. We know you'd all like to have an opportunity to amend this thing, but there just isn't time. We'll give it to you if we could, but there isn't time. So, this happens. Thank you. Thank you. He's done this to us over and over and over again. You know, when Trump finally got elected, Mitch promised us this won't happen again. We'll give you time. There will be time. And I kept asking him every single week. I chair a lunch at Temple Island Republican Center. It's called the steering committee. And every week I'd ask him, when are we going to get to see the spending bill after Trump took off? Oh, you don't get it, Mike. You don't get it. He sent it to us at 7:32 p.m. on Wednesday night, March 23rd. Of 2018. Trump had been in office for an entire year. Mitch had been keeping him running on the fumes of continuing resolutions. He finally sent this out. Dear colleagues, taxes and bill, we might vote on it at some point. So you might want to get familiar with it. I knew what this meant, because I'd been around the merry-go-round enough times. I immediately sent it to my staff. We pulled all-nighters, getting ready, because I knew it was coming and coming at us fast. 2,232 pages long. The House of Representatives passed it before lunch the next day. The Senate passed it over my loud, strong, vociferous objections at 2:30 or 3 in the morning the next day. It was too late to call President Trump, so I called him first thing in the morning, and his staff sort of screened me out most of the day. Finally, it was Friday night. He had signed the bill. It was time to go home. I boarded the Delta flight on the way home. I was 30 minutes into the flight when my secretary texted and said the president is trying to reach you. And I said, too bad, I'm going to be on a plane for another 4 hours. Moments later, I saw these two Delta flight attendants walking down the plane. From the front, they're holding this bright neon orange headset. I've been on this plane. I've sat on literally every seat on the plane. And I know the flight attendants and everything. I've never seen this device. It's this orange headset with a really long cord that stretches the entire length of the plane. They get to the back of it, and everybody's quiet right then. They all fall asleep, and they said, "Excuse me, sir, the President of the United States wants to speak to you from the White House Situation Room. Will you take the call?" I said, "No, I'm terribly busy right now." They take me back to the gallery. I'm almost finished, I promise. But they need to hear this part. This is a good story. They said, "Push this button when you want to talk. We'll speak to you from here. Hello? Mike, just got your message, sorry. Congress in less time, there's nothing I can do. They want to shut down, I'm so sorry." And I said, "No, I know your heart's in the right place, Mr. President, but your staff's not telling the truth. We hadn't left town. They kept the call from you. You could have vetoed it. We could have passed something else to keep the government funded. And this is a lie told to you by the firm. And I explained what the firm is. And moments later, we lost connection. The flight attendants came back and said, "He'll call you when you land." And I said, "Yeah, right." I was not even to the curb at Salt Lake City International, and then I picked up the phone. "Hello? Mike, so sorry I missed it." We talked for a solid hour, and we're going to get to do this again. Well, maybe I can do it right next time. And we never quite got there because the firm kept him in this loop. But we've had many conversations since then, and when he has the chance to serve as the 47th President of the United States, he will not call for that again. Anyway, look, bright future ahead. Bright future ahead because I believe in something Winston Churchill is reported to have said, which is the American people can always be counted up to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other alternative. Mr. Churchill didn't intend that as a compliment, but it is one, and I take it as such. Because it's what differentiates us from the animals. It's what differentiates us from every other country that I know anything about. We do the right thing. Sometimes we take the scenic route. We've given this progressive government crap a nice, long, hard college try. And it's at an end, and it's going to come crashing down, and the Constitution will be there to save us. And that's why we need one of these folks to get elected and get back there and fight like hell to restore it. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to give a closing hymn.
There's no way we know who starts.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors. Ladies first.
Yeah, let's start at the other end, since John went last on the introductions. It's a good suggestion, Brad.
I think what we're all really not wanting is to follow my plea. Listen, this has been a great evening. I don't think I'll use my whole 2 minutes, but there are a few points I'd like to make with you. First of all, you're out here on a Friday night. Congratulations. Thank you. We need more people just like you around the state, and thank you for doing your job. Second of all, we have a lot of questions about mostly what I would call our DC life, how we would vote or how we would act in Washington, D.C. And I just want to bring up another point and talk to you about the other side of this equation, which is what we do back here when we're in the district. I'm very proud of what I've been able to do the last 7 years. As you know, town halls are a little bit tricky. I'm just going to brag a little bit. I've done about 300 town halls in 7 years. And I'm proud to say, thank you, I'm proud to say that my office just received an award for the #1 office in the entire United States for outreach, accessibility, and accountability. I don't need to tell you that you all have massive problems in your interactions with the federal government. It could be the VA, it could be the IRS, right? It could be any of these government passports. And I want you to know that when you call my office, that's why we're the #1 office in the United States. We solve these problems for you with your interactions. Now, I would just tell you one thing. This state is big, and there's a lot of rural. It's easy to get to the heavy populated areas. But I want you to know that if I'm elected your senator, I'll be in every corner of the state. And I'll see the cities that don't have a lot of votes, and I'll make their issues and your issues my issues. And I'll not only fight for you, I'll win for you. Thank you for your time.
When I was in the White House, one day we found out that the Hurricane Hugo had hit Puerto Rico. It had wiped out the electricity, all communications. The police had gone completely abdicated their duties. Even at the federal penitentiary, the guards had wanted to go home, so they opened the doors, the prisoners were gone. And I was called by the President of the United States and said, get your butt down to the Situation Room. It's just like in the movies, it's a little smaller, most of the communications outside. And I sat there with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Staff to the President, a few other military leaders, and we had to decide what we were going to do. And we're listening to what's going on shortwave radios, and we're getting broadcasts that there are people, this is probably a Second Amendment plug, they're on the roofs of their homes and buildings with shotguns and rifles trying to protect their property because there was complete lawlessness on that island. And we were deciding whether or not to send the military in to restore order. And I'll never forget when one of the staff members said, well, do we have to take guns? And the chairman of USOR said, we're not going in without, we're not sending our boys in without guns. He said, how about without bullets then? And I'll never forget him looking and said, that slice of the bologna might have been, son. We're going in and we're going in locked and loaded. That's what we need in this Senate seat. I'm a conservative. I've had presidents trust me with the toughest assignments that they've had. Can I get a couple seconds?
Yeah.
Good now. I was the one that they sent up to the Hill when they had a tough fight. And as a lawyer, I've done some of the biggest cases in this state. I had a case last year with $3.6 billion. If you got a client who's their company's at the edge of failure, $3.6 billion, who do you hire? You hire someone who's tough, you hire someone who's smart, you hire someone who's going to get it done. And I will be that person for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you, Senator Lee. I think he's accurately described the problem. It's that we have this firm, right? That's the problem. And we have to have folks that have demonstrated the resolve to stand up to that establishment and get us back to process. And that's what I've been able to do time and time again. I refer you to TrentStaggs.com. Go take a look at a page called Proven Fighter, and you'll see that. It isn't just the fact that I took on and challenged Mitt Romney. Right? We were able to do that. It demonstrates a willingness to take on that establishment. That's a tough thing to do. It's a very tough thing to do, but I had said to my wife, enough is enough. We can't afford, Utah deserves another constitutional conservative, another America First senator. And that's what you get with me. If you want another Mitt Romney, don't vote for me. Right? If you want another Mike Lee, that's exactly what you'll get. And I've demonstrated that time and time again. If you go to that website and take a look at the times in which I've been forced with tough decisions and had to make hard calls. And I've always erred on the side of liberty and your constitutional rights. And I think we also have to have somebody who understands federalism. I say I'm more than a conservative, I'm a federalist. And the reason I say that is because in the position as a mayor, I've had to push back for 10, now going on 11 years, against not just federal, but also state and county overreach. And having that perspective, being able to take that back to DC and work day one with this coalition that I've already built, support President Trump. We've got the endorsement of a sitting U.S. Senator and Tommy Tuberville. We've only got about 15 to 18 people that are like Senator Lee and Senator Tuberville that are really fighting for America First constitutional conservative principles. We need 7 or 8 more, folks. And once we have that, we'll have a majority with our own party in the Senate. We'll take control and get a leader that's not Mitch McConnell 2.0. Sorry, I can't do the impression as well as you. But that will get us back to order and saving this country. I ask for your support.
I gotta tell you, my former boss did a great job tonight, and I have been slammed on Twitter as Mike Lee in a wig. I was a little bit insulted, I don't know if we talked about it, but somebody decided to put my hair on him recently, and I really thought I was cuter than that, because he does look like me when he has my hair. In this state, I did a lot of the work in pushing back against the federal government. We all know that that's where our greatest problems lie, and that's where the greatest infringements on our liberties lie. I am the Salt Lake County Chair of the Federalism Commission. I sit on Utah Citizens for the Constitution Board that last year, undergrad, got legislation passed that designates the month of September as Founders and Constitution Month. I sit on the committee with Tad Hollister and others that is Why I Love America committee. Go to our Instagram. There are things that we're doing all the time. We have people much younger than I am who do cool stuff. And we are working to save this nation. And there is no, I will tell you, temporal savior. It will be done by every single one of you in this room. It will be done by people like all of us who care about this country, who understand its founding, and who are willing to do the difficult work of restoring it to the place that it was meant to be. CarolynForSenate.com. Or, you know what? I took it, I said, you guys are awesome. MikeLeeInAWig.com also redirects to my website if you don't know how to spell my name. So thank you.
Tomorrow morning, up in Rich County, I'm actually doing my visit, voter event, whatever you want to call it, in the 29th county. I've covered all 29 counties with events since the beginning of October. And I love this state. But one thing that I've heard everywhere I go is Utahns want to elect a conservative fighter that's going to go back to Washington, D.C. and fix things. And interestingly enough, it is not just Utahns that are watching this U.S. Senate race. People all over the country, and I know people in Washington are watching this Senate race because they're curious about our 2 U.S. senators. And what they're wondering is, are we going to send someone back that's going to work with Senator Lee as his wingman or wingwoman to get this country back on track? Or are we going to send someone that's going to go back and cancel out votes on spending bills and on Supreme Court justice bills for elections and votes? Things like that. Well, I want you to know this. I told you earlier my conservative credentials, whether it's biggest tax cuts in history, constitutional carry, the most pro-life abortion laws in the country, reducing taxes for veterans, eliminating state taxes for veterans, and the list goes on and on. I have been through the fire. I'm tested and I'm trusted, and I want to go back and represent Utah's values in Washington, D.C. in a way that you will all be incredibly proud of. Proud of a conservative that is fighting for you. Thank you.
Yes.
Wow, what a great group of candidates. Aren't they amazing? How many of you enjoyed the music out in the lobby and the music in here? So out in the lobby, was fiddler Brianna Jacobson, and accompanying her on the keyboard was her aunt Sherry Webb. They are part of the Cash String Quartet. Is Brianna, are you here? Come on up. Let's give her a round of applause. And here in this room was a little dynamite, Natalie's son. Natalie, come on up here. Natalie is 8 years old and a second grader. She started playing the piano when she was 4 years old and has won quite a few statewide competitions. In 2023, Natalie performed with American West Symphony and the Chamber Orchestra. Her favorite composer is Mozart. Natalie loves animals and wants to be a veterinarian and a concert pianist. Thank you for being here tonight, Natalie. And one favor, Natalie would like to get a photo with all of you candidates and with Senator Lee. On Thursday, April 18th, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., the Box Elder County Republican women will be hosting a mix and mingle with the other 6 U.S. Senate candidates. This event will be at Idle Isle. So please watch our Facebook and Instagram for more details. Thank you to USU and for the use of the facility, and thank you to Tammy for taking such great care of us. So please take some time to get some refreshments and meet your candidates. Thank you for coming.